Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a first look at something pretty exciting. We're going to be taking a first look at the upcoming Tier 10 for the new British heavy tank line. This British heavy tank line is going to be new in the sense it's going to have a new mechanic. It's going to have a double barrel mechanic, but not quite the traditional double barrel mechanic that we know and love in the Soviet heavy tanks. It's going to have a mode that you switch very similar to how you switch with the siege mode for this Swedish tank destroyer, So you basically are going to press a button and then you're instantly going to be able to fire a double barrel shot with one click instead of the preparation time you have with the Soviet heavy tanks. So, new mechanic, new tech tree, this is the tier 10. Let's have a look at this thing's statistics. So, this thing's statistics have been updated so often and so regularly, I can't just give you a nice, fancy, pretty graphic. I've had to keep it updated on a spreadsheet. So, the DPM for this tank, as of recording on the 1st of November, its DPM is 2,628. That's really quite nice. We're going to compare this tank's statistics in a second to some similar tanks in the game. But 2,628 is a really quite nice number. That means that this tank is going to be pretty efficient at churning through tanks. Right, now this is where it gets a little bit confusing. As I said, this thing has two modes. In its normal mode, that's the statistics on the left-hand side, okay? In its double barrel mode, that's the statistics on the right-hand side. So, you have a 9.59 second reload for one round when you're firing cyclically outside of the double barrel mode, but when you're in the double barrel mode, your reload time becomes 19.18 seconds because obviously you're not reloading one shell, you're reloading two shells. Make sense? Okay. Therefore, your alpha in the single shot mode is 420. It becomes 840 in the double barrel mode. That's really quite nice. 420 alpha base is really quite comfortable, but 840 in the double barrel mode, obviously that does increase your reload. It's different. Obviously, your DPM stays the same because all of it essentially it's doing is it's doubling your reload. So it's not like when you're in the double barrel mode, you sacrifice DPM. You have exactly the same DPM. So the same alpha, just doubled. The same reload, just doubled from the single to the double barrel mode. So therefore, you have the same DPM. It's quite complicated, but I hope that makes sense. Dispersion. Okay. So in the double barrel mode, you actually trade off the ability to do the 840 for some dispersion, aim time, and speed. Okay. So your dispersion in the single shot mode is 0.32. That's really quite nice. That's really quite a nice gun handling for a heavy tank. But in the double barrel mode, it's 1.15. That's really bad. So that basically forces the double barrel mode to be used when you're up close and personal to your opponents, where the gun handling is not really going to be an issue. What is going to matter is potentially having an opponent in front of you is 800 HP. You can switch to your double barrel mode, click once, you kill them in one shot, rather than in having to shoot, reload for 9.59 seconds, then shoot. Make sense? So therefore, the gun handling of this tank very much does force it to be that, forces the mechanic to be used as up close and personal. However, outside of the double barrel mode, its cyclical gun handling is pretty incredible. 0.32 dispersion, 1.92 seconds aim time. However, that aim time does become 3.36, so therefore, another thing forcing you to use this as close to your opponents as possible. Speed-wise, so 32 forwards and 14 backwards. This is outside of the double barrel mode. 32 is slow. It is going to force this tank to use a turbo. However, you can afford to use a turbo because you don't have to use V-stabs because this thing's gun handling is really quite nice. So you can very much get away with running hardening turbo rammer on this tank, I feel, in my opinion, definitely, because 32 is going to need that turbo. However, when you do switch to that double barrel mode, that forward speed becomes 20. We're not quite sure yet whether the turbo is going to affect that, but I'd imagine so. So that makes it another mandatory requirement to basically run a turbo on this tank because 20 is really slow. But once again, you should really only be using the double barrel mechanic to kind of finish off those opponents in front of you who are like 800 HP. And once again, another thing with this changing of the modes, you don't have to stop. You can do it on the move. It takes 2 seconds, but you can do it whilst driving. So you can like switch into the double barrel mode, peek around a corner as you're peeking around a corner, do it, switch back. Make sense? Yeah. So the speed is once again another nerfing factor to stop the double barrel mechanic being pretty overpowered, because it does have that potential, but by limiting its dispersion, aim time, and its impact on speed, that does obviously force it to be used in that close range, as we've said. Okay, HP, 2,400 is okay. 2,400 HP for a British heavy tank is 100 more than the Super Conqueror, so that's not bad, but obviously we did see the Super Conqueror's hit points nerfed pretty recently. But 2,400 is okay, but as I said, you're probably going to want to run a hardening on this, so you're pulling this up to about 2,500, 2,600 with field mods, so pretty nice. View range 390, pretty nice. It can spot for itself as well. That's another nice little thing here. And its armor. Okay. Unfortunately, we can't quite look at this thing's armor on tanks.gg yet because it's not on there. However, we can have a look at its just base values in terms of a statistic. So its armor for its hull is going to be 200 millimeters. That's really quite nice. It looks from the photo, which we can definitely have a look at, it looks pretty flat. Probably this thing here is going to be a bit of a weak point. But generally, you know, this kind of big boxy square area, 200 is not horrendous, but not incredible. It does also have a lower plate. So 200 is, it's okay. However, 260 millimeters for the turret is where this tank starts to get pretty nice. Because what is most likely going to be happening is this whole area here is going to be pretty thick, probably not penetratable. This is probably going to be an auto ricochet angle. This is probably also going to be an auto ricochet angle underneath the gun. So what is actually 260 millimeters thick may only just be this kind of area around the gun here. Obviously, we're not 100% sure yet because we can't see it properly, but that would be my guess, is that this thing's going to be pretty strong turret-wise. It looks like it has a cupola. Unfortunately, we can't quite see how big that cupola is going to be. But it looks like it is going to have a cupola, which obviously will also be a balancing factor. And maybe there'll be some weak points, like either side of the gun immediately and in between the gun, similar to like the 7032. Any of you have played that tank? The Tier 8 Soviet Premium double-barreled heavy tank. But penetration-wise, standard pen 258 AP, that's quite nice. A gold pen 318 APCR, that's not terrible, but it's not incredible. AP APCR is a decent ammo configuration in my opinion. Basically means you can just get away with firing full APCR, which is pretty nice. 318 is going to be okay, and it will manage at tier 10, but it will struggle against Mouse E100, you know, your super heavies. It will struggle to pen those flat plates. But it will be passable. Definitely not the worst. And of course, British heavy tank, it has to have 10 degrees of gun depression. And it does. It has 10 degrees of gun depression. So, let's compare this tank now to the Super Conqueror. And then a little bit of a cross-sideways comparison to the Tier 8 Premium double-barreled heavy tank, the Contradictious. Obviously, the statistics don't really match up, but we can kind of see how the line might improve. That makes sense? So, the FV230 compared to the Super Conqueror. Okay. FV has got better DPM. Not by much, only by 21, but it has slightly better DPM. Reload, slightly longer, but the alpha is slightly higher. So, 420 compared to 400, 9.59 compared to 9.2. Obviously, the Super Conqueror is a cyclical gun only, so that's the only statistics we can really compare here. Dispersion, 0.32, 0.32. So the FV is going to have very similar gun handling to the Super Conqueror because its dispersion and its aim time are identical. Obviously, only in the single shot mode. Speed-wise, it's going to be slightly slower than the Super Conqueror, hence why I said you're going to want to run a turbo on it. However, it's going to be slightly quicker in reverse, which is just kind of a little bit of an ease of life kind of thing. Not massively impactful, but 2 kilometers an hour faster backwards is okay. HP, as I said, 100 extra for the FV is really quite nice. View range, however, the Super Conqueror has 100 meters more, sorry, 10 meters more, not 100, 400 compared to 390. Here's where the armor gets a bit interesting. So we know that the hull armor on the Super Conqueror in reality isn't actually like 152 millimeters, it's actually a lot thicker than that. So maybe the 200 millimeters for the FV is going to be similar to the Super Conquerors in that it's actually only 152 in very small places, with the lower plate being its main weak point. But we'll have to wait and see. But the bit that I'm finding interesting is the 260 millimeters for the turret on the FV, for 279 for the Super Conqueror. Obviously, the Super Conqueror has its weak points. It's likely the FV is also going to have similar-ish weak points, but obviously we're going to have to wait and see. But on paper, they're going to have similar performing turrets. Penetration-wise is where it gets a little bit interesting. So the FV has 1 millimeter less standard AP pen than the Super Conqueror. However, the Super Conqueror has 12 millimeters more. Sorry, not 12. 8 millimeters more APCR gold penetration, 326 compared to 318 for the FV, and they both have 10 degrees of gun depression. So from that, we can kind of see in its single shot mode, this tank, the FV230, is Canopener, which is quite a funny name, is going to be very similar to the Super Conqueror in its current state. It might fall a little bit between the Super Conqueror in its old state and now, but more close towards its current state. Only thing that it really has going for it better than the Super Conqueror right now is its DPM, ever so slightly more. And maybe its armor / its extra 100 hit points. So it's basically going to be a new Super Conqueror, but it's going to have the mechanic to do the double barrel, which is going to make it, in my opinion, better than the Super Conqueror, just because it makes it more flexible. And having flexibility in a tier 10 heavy tank is all important, and having the mechanic, even if you never use it, just having it as an opportunity in that clutch scenario is important. So let's do a little bit of a sideways comparison now very quickly between the FV230 and the FV226. So the 226 is the tier 8 premium that we're getting in the Holiday Ops Christmas boxes this year. So DPM, we can see a pretty significant increase to the tier 10, on the tier 10. So we're likely going to see, probably for the tier 9 of the tech tree, around a 2.3, 2.2 kind of area. We can see how the reload is shorter for the tier 10 and the alpha higher. So maybe the tier 9 might have a 400 alpha gun. Maybe having the ability to get to the tier 10's gun as a research module. Not 100% sure there. Dispersion wise, we can see how the tier 10 has better dispersion, better aim time, relatively significantly 0.35 for the tier 8, 0.32 for the tier 10, 1.92 for the tier 10, 2.11 for the tier 8. So maybe the tier 9 falls between that, 0.3, 0.4 dispersion, aim time of maybe like 2 seconds flat, probably around there, I'd say. Interestingly, the tier 8 is quicker, 36 compared to 32. I'd imagine that's got something to do with the tier 8 being lighter, the tier 10 being heavier, having similar engines, I would imagine. Obviously, we can't quite see this thing's soft statistics right now to see its power to weight ratios, but I'd imagine that would be why the FV230, the tier 10, is slower. HP, you know, obviously we've got the tier 8 to tier 10 scalable nature of HP there. Maybe we'd see the tier 9 having 1900 to 2000 HP, probably, I'd say around there. View range, we can see how it's scaled up as well. I'd say the tier 9 has 380, smack bang in the middle. That'd be a good mix in my opinion. The armor is interesting. We can see how it only has 150 millimeters of hull armor, which is very similar to the Super Conqueror, as we can see. Obviously, we don't quite know how effective that is actually going to be in reality, but we can kind of get an idea of how the armor is going to scale. Interestingly, the turret armor on the tier 8 is very similar to the turret armor on the tier 10. Obviously, we don't know its effective values, but on paper, very similar, which is very interesting. Penetration-wise, we've obviously got the scalable difference here. 218 standard for the tier 8, 258 for the tier 10. But I'd imagine for the tier 9, we'd likely see 230 standard, maybe 240 standard, maybe 300 gold, maybe 278, kind of that area gold. But we'd have to wait and see. But so far, in my opinion, The FV230 Canopener is looking interesting. Important to note, these statistics have changed and will continue to change relatively regularly. If there's any major changes, do check the comments or the description, because I'll put the major changes in there. But at the minute, this tank's looking good in my opinion. It's going to be competitive as well, I feel. It's coming in kind of going, okay, I'm slightly better than the Super Conqueror, because it has the mechanic which increases the tank's flexibility, slightly more HP, slightly more DPM. It's basically going to be an ever so slightly better Super Conqueror. So any of you out there which love the Super Conqueror, maybe you'll also love this tank. In my opinion, it's going to be good. Obviously, we don't really know this tank's effective armor values yet. That may really have an impact on this tank's capabilities. Its armor might be horrendous. We don't know. But in my opinion, as of right now, I'm quite excited about this tank. I think it's looking quite good. I think it's looking quite promising. It's definitely not going to be overpowered. It's just going to kind of fall into that range between good and very good. That's my opinion on it right now. But yeah, do let me know your opinions down in the comments below. We can have a conversation about it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all very soon.